Welcome home, racing fans. Well, you've had some great reports so far with the Thunderslot Mustang. It is just all the rage out there. Everyone's talking about it, and rightfully so. I'm a little bit behind the power curve, as usual, but finally going to get a chance to get involved with this car since we first looked at the prototype about 8 months ago. So sit back. I think it's going to be an interesting ride. And we'll get right to it. We're going to talk about the outside. And I'll just say it right away. If you're looking for a perfectly scaled model, this is not the one you're looking for. It's too low, it's too wide, it's not proportioned right. All the comments that you've read already, the criticisms, it's well deserved. On the other side, well, Thunderslot's not making any apologies. They built a race car. This was built to go fast. They took some liberties. Here's the thing. It's pretty simple. Either it bothers you or it doesn't. If it bothers you, best advice, just don't buy the car, okay? Because if you're looking for a perfect, replica of the Shelby Mustang, this isn't it. But it's not that bad. But yeah, it's not perfect. So, like I said, if it bothers you, just don't buy the car. On the outside, the paintwork that they did do in the stripes looked pretty well. I do have some dirt specks here and there in all three of my samples, so it's certainly not perfect. But I do like the colors. They really pop on this car, and the white is very opaque. The driver figure, as you can see right here, is not well done. I don't know who they hired to paint the driver figure, but they're pretty horrible in the helmet department. The paint they used is just way too white, and it's smeared with the red of the helmet and the black. It's just, well, like I said, very poorly done. Also, the mirrors here, as you can see here on the side, these are basically useless. You could put some glue on here to support them, some UV glue, but they're going to break off. This one here was already broken almost completely when I got the car, and it finally just came off. I just removed it by hand. It's nothing really to keep. They're going to come off. So if you're racing this in combat, don't expect them to last too long. So there you have it. Like I said, there's imperfections here. It's not a perfect car on the outside, but it still isn't bad. And by the way, I do like the wheels. They really did a good job on the inserts on this, so that really adds, some appeal to the car. But now that you know that, let's get inside. So the chassis is a two-part design. It will remind you of a flexi-type chassis if you're familiar with those. If you're not, you can Google it and look it up on the commercial side of things, and you'll see the resemblance. The plastic itself, well, it could be a little stiffer, I suppose. Some people have already made those comments, but it is what it is. We have had an issue with the center part here of the chassis having a slight bow to it. This one here, I've already taken care of it, as you can see, and we're going to cover that later on in the video of the modifications that we've made. The front wheels are plastic press-on like other Thunderslot cars. We're going to talk about the tires at length here in just a little bit. The rear wheels, of course, they are aluminum with the set screw motor, Mach 21. This one here, I bench tested it at 21,420. They're within a couple of RPM, 100 RPM of each other, so not a bad variance really, and I like this motor. Seems to work well. 11 to 32 gears like the graphics said, and then I have the weights up there as well for the chassis and the body. So like I said, a two-piece design. You're going to need 3 wrenches here. First of all, for the body and for the inner part of the pod system here, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, and 4. You're going to need a T6 wrench, a Torx wrench right here. Fits wonderfully. That's exactly what you need. You're going to have that one. Then you're going to need a 50 thousandths. That's going to be right here for your wheels and for your gear. So you're going to need that for the Allen screws. Plus, up front, you have your adjustment right here for your front axle height. So you're going to need the 50 thousandths for that. And then finally, you're going to need a good old-fashioned cross tip for your guide screw and for your motor screws. So Yeah, only 3, right? All right, well, that basically covers most of it. We're going to go into some of the finer details of the chassis later on in the video. Okay, we've already talked about this online quite a bit actually, but up front here, these 2 holes right there, they are for like a ball bearing type setup, these little outriggers as I call them. And the idea here is that they will help support the front of the car going into the corners. Again, this lends itself to a commercial track design, and the balls will snap in here, make contact with the track to help support it. I can tell you right now, I'm not going to use that feature. I don't want anything dragging my track. If it doesn't bother you and it'll help you in your pursuit of speed, you go right ahead and use it. As far as I'm concerned, they could have left them off. I've got my front axle set up the way I want it, and I think that's going to be good enough for me because I won't use that feature. As far as adjusting the front part of your chassis there, I've already installed it right here. You can put a 3mm set screw, put those in here. You can turn this down. That'll adjust the limit of your chassis there if you're wanting to adjust it to bring it down. So as you pick it up, that will adjust your limit. So you'll be able to do that there as well. But I've got some good float loosening this up pretty well. Got some really good flex there. I'm happy with that. I've got the front axle set up. I'm happy with how they did that. The final thing is, as you can see, hopefully here, you can see that we need to do some work. We need to get over there to the tire machine. We need to get some work done on these front tires because yes, they do have a high center, which is okay as far as contact patch goes for your fronts, but they still need some truing. So I'm going to get to that, and that'll really help smooth out this car getting these things round in front. So anyway, just wanted to cover that. Next thing we're going to talk about is the guide adjustment. So out of the box, all 3 of my guide screws were very loose. So just using your handy dandy Phillips, tighten that down as far as it needs to go. Make sure you don't over tighten, but that you have free movement. So just make sure you tighten that down, and then if you want to loosen these screws and trim off some of this excess braid, that would be a good idea. I just trimmed it off a little bit. It was just pretty long and it's just rubbing the bulkhead there, so I trimmed it off. But yeah, you'll probably have to give this a tighten up because they were pretty loose, all 3 of them. So just a word of caution, when you're tightening these screws, you want to tighten them up just a little bit so they clear the body, or you have to sand the inside of the body there because they might rub. But as you can see here, the guide is split right there on this side, and that's from over tightening this screw. So even if you don't break it, sometimes the stress, the fracture will come after the fact. But normally when you're tightening, if you go too far, you'll hear it pop, and that's what's going to happen. So just be careful when you're adjusting these screws. So I want you to hear that. A lot of people, you're immediately going to say, oh, Harry, you got a cracked pinion. And you know what? 95% of the time, you would be right. Not in this case, but we'll talk about it. Okay, so we're on the same page here. I want to let you know that when it comes to brands like this, Thunderslot, Slot-It, NSR, Scale Auto, Sideways, these more advanced competition level cars, I don't just take them from the case and throw them on the track and try to make a judgment on them. I just don't think it's really fair. These cars are designed to be adjusted, and when they come from the factory, well, sometimes they just need a little bit. For example, and to be completely objective, this car here, I put power to it, it didn't go anywhere because the spur gear was loose, the set screw was not tightened, and it just sat there. It's not really a knock against the car or the brand, it's just part of it. So I always go through, double check all the set screws, make sure everything is tight, make sure nothing is rubbing, That's another part of it with adjustment. If it's so far out of adjustment it won't, that you're having contact between the tire and the body, well then adjust it. That's part of owning these cars. If you disagree, well, okay, but to me, I just feel it's in fairness that if they're designed to be adjusted and suited for different tracks, that you should go through them real quick before you give a test run. And now, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to get some fresh laps now that this thing's tightened up and ready to go. The car is still smooth, but it's going to need some work. There's a little bit of chatter there up front. We're just going to have to go through and set up that front end. Like I'm saying, with the adjustability of these cars, that's what you're going to have to do. So I don't want to judge it too hard, but I'll say this car's got some potential. I've heard a lot about the compound. I've worked with a little bit on these tires. I'm optimistic. Yeah, 4.1. I'm not really pushing it though. I've had a few laps with it. Like I said, there's some improvements to be made. Might be a tick faster if the set screws and stuff weren't banging together. We'll take care of that. We'll take care of all of it, a little bit at a time. But I'm very optimistic. It may not be a perfect scale model, but I think we're going to have a fast mover on our hands once we get things sorted out. Okay, you're going to want to glue the bushings in place so they don't spin inside the mount and over time cause problems. So you don't need a thick adhesive in my opinion. I'm just going to use some Hansen's Hard as Nails clear nail polish, or very thin model glue, and just a light coat right there. You don't need a lot. Now I've already done the other side, but once you do that, you want to keep your axle in place. You want to bring it through and get it mounted. And you want to leave the axle in there. You want to make sure that you've got the best alignment possible. So once you've done that and you've pressed it in there all the way, now you can just let it dry. I usually wait about 30-45 minutes. I'm not in a hurry. Again, if you want to use super glues, things of that nature, that's on you. Just be very, very careful when you're using things like that, because it could seize things up and cause more problems than it's worth. So try to be patient. Just use an adhesive that takes a little curing time. So others have reported that the chassis can be warped, and it's kind of due to the screw coming in here in the center, and the car has adjusted with the guide out onto the case, kind of bending it. So they've used piano wire 3/64, as you've seen other enthusiasts use. It fits right in here, as you can see. It's almost like this groove was made for it, but make sure that you check your piano wire as well as the chassis to make sure it's flat and true. You don't want any bent wire in here. I use a good setup block, and if you're going to start doing this, I suggest you invest in one. So I've got a good setup block. Now this is just very flat. There's no movement at all. If you don't have a setup block, you can use a piece of glass, picture frame glass. Works really good, nice and flat. It'll work in a pinch, or even a vanity mirror, making sure that it's a glass mirror. But we like using those too, and that really helps you. Plus you can put your axle on here as well and do a roll test, to make sure that it's nice and true. So we just kind of put our axle on there. You can sit there, you can look at it, and you can roll it, and you can see it, as well as check the each end and the center with the caliper, making sure your axle is straight. But anyway, back to the chassis. We have this nice and flat now. I think it's pretty good. I've had one that was just unharmed. It was perfectly flat. I'll probably put the wire inside of it anyway. But anyway, 3/64 wire, that's what you're going to want to use. Put it right here on the outside, and it'll stiffen it up. Okay, so I've cut the wire about 2 1/4 inches. You're just going to have to measure it and test fit it. I've got it right here past this recess, all the way down to where the chassis angles. You can go straight all the way here if you want to. I just made them even. Then just using some alligator clips, making sure that you're biting in the material, pressing it down here in this groove all the way. Then I'm just going to take some just cheap thin super glue on a toothpick, put it in here. We'll be good to go. So one of the problems during testing is we heard a noise, and it actually sounded like there was a cracked pinion. Just had a little clicking noise to it, and right away that's what we thought. But that wasn't the case. And hopefully this will show you, and I have a graphic there. What the case is the set screw right here for the gear is just ever so slightly, we're talking the thickness of a piece of paper, making contact with the motor screw. The set screw is just too long, and the motor screw there that secures the motor just a little too thick, and it just makes contact. And as you can see, when I turn it, hopefully you can see it, that it's actually backing out the gear. See, it's rubbing and backing it out, and it was making contact. 2 out of the 3 cars had that issue, so please check it. I mean, for me, you can just take a file, you can file down that screw. If you have to have that second screw there, just file it down a little bit. Like I said, we're talking the thickness of a piece of paper. John Albright looked at his cars. His seemed to be free and clear with no issues, but I can even tell from the screw under power that it's rubbing. So on mine, they're rubbing. And even if they weren't, that's pretty close to call. I'd still take a file and sand down that motor screw just a little bit. Not a lot, but just enough to make sure we have clearance. And the other thing that you might want to do is you can notice how close the inside of the tire here is to the pinion. You do have some room here to move and push the pinion on a little bit more, so I'm going to do that as well, because on this one we have plenty of room, but on a couple other ones, these are just off a few thousandths here and there, and they can get pretty close. And if you're wanting to fit a wider tire on here that takes up the complete rim, not like these, but takes up a little bit more, you're going to have to move this pinion over a little bit, which is fine. You still have room to play with. But anyway, I'm not saying yours is going to rub, that you're going to have this issue, but if I were you, I would just check it. So let's talk about that set screw rubbing the motor screw here. You can do a couple of things. First of all, I can tell you that, as crazy as it sounds, the difference between, let's say, my cars and John Albright's cars that we were talking about is that there is a variance in thickness of the screw heads. So back here I have examples of these screws, and I just noticed them by sight, and that alone is a feat in itself. But I can take a caliper and measure the thickness here, the face, and this one's about 1.43 millimeter, and then the next one comes along and get that on there, 131. And I can tell you that's the difference, because that's how close, as we show in the photo there again, that's how close it is to making contact. So my first idea here, as you can see, is I've done nothing but take the screw, put it on a file, dragged it back and forth a few times, and just filed it down. And you can see here, hopefully you can see there, that I filed it down, yet I didn't damage the screw or take away too much material. The cross tip still fits there, secures the motor, does its job, and now we have, that's right, clearance, we have plenty. Now, the second thing you can do is you can add a shim. Slucker Corner makes a 5/1000 shim, just very, very, very thin, and you can put that here in between there and the wheel, and that will do the trick as well. Like I said, it doesn't take a whole lot of room. The only problem is with adding a shim is that depending on how you set up the rear here, you don't have a lot of room between your tire and the body to make contact. The more you bring this out, the more likely you are to get some rubbing depending on how low you're going to set your body. So keep that in mind if you're going to try to add a shim. To me, either or. It's just as easy. I just filed it a little bit, brought the thickness of the screw down, and now we have no problems. So I've already taken the pinion and I've moved it back closer to the motor and away from the inside sidewall of the tire. The face of the pinion and the inside sidewall here, they were just very, very close to touching. So all we did was just installed it a little further, and we still have really good contact here between the pinion and the spur. Just check that because it could be rubbing. So yes, the inserts do need some attention. Some of them are not fully seated. They don't have enough adhesive. They could come flying out while you're winning the race. You don't want that. I don't really like to use a hard adhesive for these, so I'll just use a little bit of clear nail polish, Hansen's Hard as Nails again, just like with the bushings. I don't need a lot here. Just a little goes a long way. And then put the insert in the wheel. Just press fit in there. There you go. Now it's fully seated in the wheel and should hold it just fine. Alright, you guessed it. It is time for some tire talk. I know I'm excited. I'm always excited to talk about tires. I'll tell you though, the stock tires, the rubber compound here is very good. The grip properties on my satin latex track here, this surface, is just very impressive. I don't see any reason to change it, so I'm going to keep with the stock tires for now. But with the size restrictions that we have, I tested Paul Gauge urethanes. This is a great tire, PG 2010-5LM, and that's basically a stock fit. Works really well. For the silicone crowd, CB35 firm or extra firm. I've tested both. I like the extra firm, but the size, well, that's just about as perfect as it gets to match the original size, so there won't be any rubbing. So there you go. Quick Slicks 35 XF or F firm for silicone, and Paul Gauge PGT 20-10-5LM for urethane. So just a trackside summary here. We'll go over this. I've left the front tires just the way they are. All I've done is set the ride height, and I just made sure they were fully mounted. I didn't take them off and true them. I just left them the way they are. They do have a high center, and that's fine. That's minimal contact. We're going to see how it goes. Stock guide and braid, it does have the piano wire in here, so that added a little weight, but it added a little bit more, right around 1.5 grams to 2 grams. Just a little strip here and here in the front magnet pocket in front of the motor here. Again, we're just starting out, just trying to get a baseline. Stock tires, low and slow on the tire truer there. They will crumble up a little bit, but again, you just have to go low voltage, slow rotation, add a little bit of moisture, a little bit of water to keep things cool, and I've got a pretty good scuff on them, and I like the way it feels. So on the clearance here, we're talking right around 1 millimeter. So you don't have a whole lot between the chassis and your track. So right around 1 millimeter clearance after I've set up everything. And then the final weight there with that added 53.3. That's not bad. So stock gears, and yes, I just left the grommets here, the rubber O-rings here in place. I'm just going to try to get the body on there without crushing these down. We're going to see how it runs. But I have to say, just a few test laps, I'm very, very pleased. Well, I have to tell you, see, just a little bit of work. This thing is hauling the mail. Pushing a little hard there, but my goodness, 3495, what a difference. Just a little bit of work Keeping the tires clean. I've got my Windex sponge pads here. You say just a very light truing, light scuffing, and these things are like wood magnets. So anyway, bring this car down to speed a little bit. I'm just going to give my summary right now. If, you know, scale issues aside, do I wish they could have done a little bit better job in the accuracy department? Absolutely. You can have a fast slot car that's accurate as much as you can inaccurate to a point. But the wider, longer, lower you make it, you know, as we all know, that's going to equal some performance, and that's what some people want. And again, they're not hiding it. That's what they made this car for. So I'm going to give them credit where it's due. They made a nice race car for those that are race enthusiasts. This is a great product for you out there to try. They're not giving them away, sticker price, but sometimes you get what you pay for. I've seen people now, you know, with slotted cars, NSR, scale auto, I mean, Rebel slot, $79, $80, $89, and then, I mean, they're changing wheels. And I'm like, I don't even know why. The aluminum wheels that are on there are fine, but some people like even lighter or different style than tires, guide, braid. So they're well over 100, if not more, in their car after tuning. So that price point really isn't a big deal anymore, I guess. Yeah, times change. But I like the car. I'm not disappointed. I've got the other two that'll match for 3 lanes here. I don't really see the need to get any more. I'll have 3 lanes for when folks come over to run. We'll have some fun with them. But not until another car comes out. Hopefully a bow tie or maybe a Mopar. That would be even better to run with this. Give it a running mate. But anyway, not a bad car. You'll have to let yourself and your wallet decide if it's right for you. Sorry about it being kind of long, but hope you guys got a lot out of it. And as always, I really value and look forward to your feedback online.